60 years old. I never thought I would reach this age alone, but life has a way of surprising you. I sat at the head of the long dining table in my modest suburban home, hands clasped together, looking over everything I had spent the last 2 days preparing. The tablecloth was perfectly smooth, the silverware polished so well that I could see my reflection in every spoon. Candles stood at even intervals, and in the middle, a small vase of yellow lilies, my late wife's favorite flowers. It wasn't just a birthday, it was my birthday. And for the first time in years, I wanted it to feel like it meant something. I had invited my children, Linda, my 2-year-old daughter who worked at a marketing firm, and Mark, my 8-year-old son still trying to find his footing in life. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the kind of evening where we could talk, laugh, and remember what it felt like to be a family. Birthdays used to be loud in this house. When the kids were little, my wife, Helen, would spend the whole morning baking a cake from scratch, the smell of vanilla filling every room. Linda would cover her face in frosting trying to help, while Mark would sneak bits of dough when he thought no one was looking. I can still hear their laughter, see their messy hands waving in the air as they ran to show me the birthday banner they made out of construction paper and crayons. Those were the best days of my life. But tonight felt different. It wasn't just that Helen was gone, taken too early by an illness that gave us no time to prepare, it was the way my children had changed over the years. I couldn't remember the last time we had sat down to a meal without someone checking a phone or rushing off to some urgent meeting. Still, I wanted to believe. I spent the whole day cooking, starting with a roast chicken stuffed with garlic and herbs. Helen's old recipe alongside buttery mashed potatoes, honey-glazed carrots, and a chocolate cake topped with strawberries. I even ironed my shirt and set out my best jacket, the one Helen said made me look sharp but still huggable. By 6 o'clock, everything was ready. I lit the candles, dimmed the overhead lights, and sat quietly, listening to the ticking of the old clock on the wall. The same clock that had counted down so many Christmases, birthdays, and ordinary Tuesdays in this house. I checked my watch, 6:15. They were late, but that was okay. People are busy. By 6:30, I poured myself a small glass of wine to ease the nervous energy twisting in my stomach. I checked my phone. No messages. By 6:45, I was scrolling through old photos, trying to distract myself. One photo stopped me cold. Helen holding a 2-year-old Mark, while 6-year-old Linda clung to my leg, all of us smiling like nothing in the world could touch us. What happened to us? The doorbell finally rang at 7:05. I jumped up, nearly knocking over my glass in the process. "Dad," Linda said as I opened the door, brushing past me without waiting for an invitation. She looked good, always stylish, hair tied back in a neat bun, designer bag over her shoulder, but there was something rushed in her eyes, like she was already thinking about leaving. "Happy birthday, Dad," she said, kissing me on the cheek before pulling out her phone to check something. Mark followed, holding a gift bag in one hand and a coffee in the other. "Hey, Dad. Sorry we're late. Traffic." I smiled anyway, because that's what fathers do. "I'm just glad you're here." They both set their coats down and immediately gravitated toward the table. "Wow, you cooked," Linda said flatly, her eyes on the roast chicken. "Of course I cooked. It's tradition." "Nice," Mark muttered, already scrolling on his phone. I tried to shake off the disappointment and focus on what I could control. "Well, dinner's hot and ready, so let's eat before it gets cold." We sat down, and for a few minutes, it almost felt like old times. The clinking of forks and knives filled the silence, broken occasionally by small talk. "So, how's work, Linda?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Busy. Clients, campaigns, the usual." "And you, Mark? How's the job search going?" He shrugged. "Still figuring things out. I've got a couple of leads, though." It wasn't much, but I clung to it. I told a story about how I once burned Helen's birthday dinner trying to make lasagna from scratch. I laughed at my own punchline, but the only response was a polite smile from Linda and a distracted, "That's funny, Dad," from Mark, who was still looking at his phone. I tried again. "Remember when you two made me that terrible birthday cake? The one that collapsed because you used salt instead of sugar?" Linda gave a small laugh, more out of obligation than amusement. "Yeah, I remember." The conversation fizzled like a match in the rain. When we finished eating, I stood up with a forced cheer. "All right, time for gifts." Linda perked up slightly. "Oh, right." Mark reached for the bag he'd brought in. "Here you go, Dad. Just something small." I smiled, opening it to find a bottle of cologne. "This is nice, thank you." I went to the cabinet where I'd hidden their gifts. A bracelet for Linda, passed down from Helen's jewelry collection, and a wristwatch I had worn for years but had kept in perfect condition for Mark. These weren't expensive, not compared to what I used to buy them when they were teenagers, but they were meaningful. They carried history, memory, love. When I handed them over, I expected smiles, maybe even a hug. But Linda frowned at the bracelet, tilting her head. This is pretty, Dad, but you know we could really use money instead. Things are tight with the apartment. Mark nodded in agreement. Yeah, Dad, cash would have been better. I mean, this is nice and all, but the words hit like a quiet slap. I stared at them for a moment, forcing a smile to cover the sting. It's your mother's, I said softly. Something she wanted you to have one day. Linda set it back in the box without looking me in the eye. Thanks, Dad. I appreciate it. I guess I expected something else. I felt something inside me tighten. Expected something else? I looked at them, both so focused on what they didn't get that they couldn't see what they had. This wasn't the birthday I had imagined. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with that strange heaviness in my chest, the kind that comes after a night you wish you could rewrite. My 60-year-old body wasn't sore from cooking or standing too long. It was sore from disappointment. But last night wasn't over yet. Not really. It was still my birthday weekend, and my kids had promised to come back later in the day. For dessert and some time together, Linda had said. She sounded convincing enough, and I wanted to believe her. So I prepared again. I cleaned up the kitchen, put fresh linens on the table, and even baked an apple pie from scratch. I hadn't baked much since Helen died, but I remembered her recipe word for word. She used to tell me, Frank, pie crust isn't just food, it's patience baked into golden flakes. So I rolled the dough slow, just like she taught me, thinking maybe patience was exactly what I needed. By 5 o'clock, the house smelled like cinnamon and warm apples, the kind of smell that used to draw the kids out of their rooms when they were teenagers. I set the pie on the counter to cool, checked the clock, and waited. At 5:15, I heard a car pull into the driveway. A smile tugged at my lips despite myself. Maybe today will be different, I thought. The front door opened, and in walked Linda first, her phone already in her hand, thumbs moving across the screen. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek. Happy birthday again, Dad, she said distractedly, sliding her phone into her purse without looking at me. Mark followed, earbuds in, nodding at whatever music was pumping through them. Hey, Dad, he said, pulling one earbud out. That pie smells good. Thanks, son, I said, my smile fading only slightly. We sat down in the living room, and almost immediately, Linda brought up work. You wouldn't believe the week I had. My boss dumped a last-minute campaign on me, and of course, I'm the one staying late every night. Mark chuckled. You work too much, Linda. I've been telling you that. Linda shot him a look. And you work too little. I tried to step in before it turned into something ugly. Hey, let's keep things light tonight, okay? I just want us to enjoy some pie and coffee. Linda sighed. You're right, Dad. Sorry. I'm stressed. I went to the kitchen and served the pie, careful to make it look nice on each plate, just like Helen used to do, with a little whipped cream on the side. When I returned, Mark was scrolling on his phone, and Linda was checking her email. I stood there for a moment, pie plates in hand, watching them, my heart sinking. Pie's ready, I said, forcing cheer into my voice. They barely looked up, mumbling, Thanks, Dad, as I set the plates down. I tried to start a conversation while we ate. So how's the apartment, Linda? It's fine. Rent went up again, though. Everything's so expensive. I nodded. Yeah, things aren't easy these days. But you're managing, right? She hesitated before answering. Yeah, we're managing, but it's tight. Mark jumped in. Tell him about the car situation. Linda looked at him sharply. Mark, what car situation? I asked. Linda sighed. James's car broke down. We had to take out a small loan to fix it. And with rent and everything else, it's a lot. I felt the old instinct kick in the part of me that wanted to fix everything with money. Well, if you need some help? No, Dad, she interrupted quickly, shaking her head. We're fine. I'm just saying, times are hard. But her tone didn't sound like someone just making conversation. It sounded like someone dropping breadcrumbs to see if I'd follow the trail. Mark leaned back, arms crossed. It's like nobody cares about how expensive life is now. People our age can barely breathe, let alone get ahead. I put my fork down slowly. I care, son. I always have. He shrugged. Yeah, but you're fine. You've got the house, the savings, everything. We're just saying. His voice trailed off, and I didn't need him to finish. There it was again, that quiet implication that what I had built, what I had saved, somehow belonged to them by default. I thought about Helen in that moment, how she would have handled this. She had a way of calming storms before they ever started. She'd probably have cracked a joke, maybe reminded the kids how lucky they were, how birthdays weren't about what you could get but who you were with. I tried to channel a little of her grace. You know, I said carefully, when I was your age, we didn't have much. Your mom and I built this together, piece by piece. And I always told myself I was working so hard so you wouldn't have to struggle the way we did. Linda looked up from her pie. We know, Dad, and we appreciate it. It's just... She hesitated. Sometimes I feel like you don't trust us, like you hold everything too tightly. I frowned. Hold everything too tightly? This house? Your mother and I worked 20 years for this place. It's not just a house, it's home. Mark leaned forward, elbows on the table. Yeah, but do you even need this big place anymore? You live here alone. You could sell it, move somewhere smaller, and actually enjoy retirement. The way he said it, like he was reading off a brochure for downsizing, made my stomach twist. Linda chimed in. Mark's right, Dad. You could sell this house and live somewhere nicer, easier to maintain. Plus, you'd have extra cash to travel, or, help us out if we needed it. There it was. Not even subtle anymore. I leaned back, suddenly tired. This house. It's not just bricks and wood. It's where you grew up. It's where your mother and I built our life. Linda glanced down at her phone, her voice quieter but still firm. We're just thinking about what's practical. I felt the room shift. The birthday weekend wasn't about me. It was about what I had, and how they could get some of it. I finished my pie in silence, the sweetness tasting bitter in my mouth. After dinner, I excused myself to the living room, where I had placed the 2 gifts I had carefully prepared days before. They weren't expensive, not in the way gifts are these days, but they were meaningful. One was a delicate gold bracelet, once Helen's, with a small engraving on the inside. For my daughter, love always finds a way. She had worn it on special occasions, and I thought passing it on to Linda might remind her of her mother's love, a love that was deeper than anything money could buy. The other gift was my old wristwatch, a sturdy silver timepiece I had received on my own 30th birthday from my father. It had traveled with me through every major chapter of life, starting my business, buying this house, holding my newborn children for the first time, and saying goodbye to Helen in the hospital. Giving it to Mark was my way of saying, "You're a man now. Carry our family's time with you." I brought them back to the dining room, feeling almost hopeful. Maybe these tokens would bridge the gap between us, remind my children who we used to be before life got noisy and money started speaking louder than love. I handed Linda's gift to her first. This was your mother's, I said softly. She wanted you to have it someday. Linda unwrapped the box slowly, lifting the bracelet into the light. For one brief moment, I thought I saw her eyes soften, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Dad, she said, her voice tight. This is beautiful, but we really could have used some cash instead. Things are tight right now, and jewelry, well, it doesn't exactly pay bills. The words landed like stones in my chest. It's not about the money, sweetheart. It's about family, about memory. Your mother... Linda cut me off. I know, Dad, and I loved Mom, but right now James and I are drowning in expenses, and I thought, I don't know, maybe you'd understand we need practical help. I took a breath, forcing calm into my voice. Practical help isn't always what's needed most. Sometimes it's reminders of who we are, where we come from. She sighed and placed the bracelet back in the box, almost dismissively, as if it were an inconvenience more than a gift. I turned to Mark, handing him the watch. This has been with me for 30 years. I wanted you to have it, to wear it, maybe even pass it down someday. Mark opened the box, pulled out the watch, and turned it over in his hands. It's nice, Dad. But honestly, I don't even wear watches. Everything's on my phone now. A gift card would have been easier. A gift card? I stared at my son, wondering when we had become strangers. When did everything become so transactional, so stripped of meaning? This isn't just about keeping time, I said quietly. It's about remembering time, our time, the days we spent together, the values I hope to pass on. Mark shrugged. Yeah, but, we've got so many bills, I just thought maybe you'd, I don't know, help out instead of giving keepsakes. You can't blame us for thinking about survival, Dad. No, I can't blame you for thinking about survival, I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to steady it. But I can be disappointed when you look at something your mother cherished, or something I've carried my whole life, and see nothing but what it's not. Linda shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. We didn't mean it like that. We just thought you'd understand. I set my hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. Understand what? That gifts from the heart are meaningless unless they come with a check attached? That family history isn't worth anything if it can't be cashed in? The silence that followed was heavy. Even Sophie, the girlfriend Mark had brought along, looked away, embarrassed for them. Linda finally spoke, her tone defensive. Dad, we're not ungrateful. It's just, times are hard, and you're in a good position. You could really help us, and instead you give us this. She tapped the bracelet box lightly. This? I repeated, my voice quieter now, almost a whisper. This was your mother's. She wore it on your graduation day, Linda. She said, one day, I'll give this to her, when she's ready to understand what it means. And this, I pointed to the watch. This was my father's gift to me. He told me, time is the only thing you can't buy back, son. Use it well. Mark looked down, but not out of guilt, more like boredom. Okay, Dad, but we just don't see it the same way you do. That's all. A deep sadness washed over me, heavier than anger, deeper than frustration. It wasn't just that they didn't want the gifts. It was that they didn't see the meaning behind them, didn't even try to. I sat back slowly, feeling suddenly old. You know, I said, when I was your age, I thought my parents were out of touch too. I thought they didn't get what life was like. Maybe I'm that parent now. Linda reached across the table, touching my hand briefly. We love you, Dad. We just need help. Help. Always help. I withdrew my hand gently, forcing a small smile. Eat your pie before it gets cold. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. We ate quietly, exchanged small talk that felt obligatory, and soon they were standing by the door. Linda hugged me quickly, Mark gave me a pat on the back, and then they were gone, leaving behind the faint smell of expensive perfume and disappointment. I stood there in the silence, staring at the two unopened boxes on the table, the bracelet and the watch both pushed aside like leftovers nobody wanted. And I realized something. This wasn't about one bad birthday. This was about years of drifting apart, about kids who had grown up measuring love in dollars instead of memories. Something had to change. 3 days after that birthday dinner, I got a call from Linda. Her voice had that polite, professional tone she used when she was about to ask for something. Dad, Mark and I were thinking, can we come by tonight? We need to talk. Something in her voice made my stomach knot. Still, I said yes. Maybe it would be an apology. Maybe a step toward fixing what had happened at my birthday. A foolish part of me hoped for that. By evening, I had brewed a fresh pot of coffee and set out cookies, Helen's old habit, whenever the kids came over. I even straightened up the living room, as if tidiness could somehow make the conversation go better. They arrived together, both dressed neatly, almost too neatly, like they had rehearsed this. Linda sat on the couch, crossing her legs, and Mark slouched in the chair opposite me. So, I said, forcing a smile, what's on your minds? Linda glanced at Mark before speaking. Dad, we've been talking a lot lately about you, about your situation. My situation? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, Mark cut in. Like, you're living in this big house all alone. It's a lot for one person to maintain, right? And expensive. I felt my chest tighten. I knew where this was going, but I stayed quiet, letting them continue. Linda leaned forward, her tone soft but calculated. We just think maybe it's time to consider downsizing. You could sell this house, move into something smaller, easier to manage. You'd have more free cash, more flexibility, maybe even travel a little. And what would I do with all that free cash? I asked slowly. Linda hesitated just long enough for me to see through her. Well, you could invest, help with some things, help us. You know, Mark's still finding stable work, and James and I, well, you know about our car situation. Selling this place would give you freedom, and it would help us too. There it was clear and sharp as broken glass. They weren't here to apologize or connect. They were here to lay claim. I leaned back, my hands clasped tightly together. This house isn't just a property, Linda. It's a home. It's where you and Mark grew up, where your mother and I built our life. Every wall here has a memory. Mark shrugged. Memories don't pay property taxes, Dad. The words cut deep. Excuse me? I'm just saying. You're hanging on to something that's too big for you now. It's not practical. Why not cash out and enjoy your life instead of rattling around in an empty house? Linda nodded. It's not about taking anything away from you, Dad. It's about making smart choices. You've got assets sitting here doing nothing while we're out there struggling. Doesn't that seem unfair? Unfair. That word echoed in my head. Unfair? I took a deep breath, my voice low but steady. You think it's unfair that I worked 40 years to give you a home, food, education. That your mother and I sacrificed vacations, nights out, even time together, so you could have stability. And now you want me to sell the one thing that still feels like her, like us, so you can have a little more cash flow? Linda's face flushed. Dad, that's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, I interrupted, my voice rising for the first time. You didn't come here to check on me. You came here to stake a claim, to tell me I'm sitting on something you feel entitled to. Mark held up his hands. Whoa, no one's saying entitled. Yes, you are, I snapped. You're saying I should give up my home, my memories, just because you two can't manage your own lives without reaching into my pockets. You think because I'm your father, my sacrifices, my savings, my life automatically belong to you. The room fell silent. Linda looked down, twisting her hands together. We're just worried about you, Dad. You're alone here. I softened my tone slightly, but the hurt was still there. Being alone doesn't mean I'm ready to dismantle everything your mother and I built. This house is more than walls and a roof. It's the last piece of her I have left. You want me to trade that for what? A smaller house and the satisfaction of paying your bills? Number. Mark frowned. You're making this dramatic. We were just trying to help. Help? I laughed bitterly. If you wanted to help, you'd visit more. You'd ask how I'm doing, not what I'm willing to sell. You'd sit with me for coffee and talk about life, not about asset liquidation like I'm some client in a boardroom. Linda's eyes welled slightly, but she didn't speak. Mark stood abruptly. Maybe we should go. Clearly this was a mistake. Yes, I said quietly, standing as well. It was. They walked to the door without another word. Linda paused for a moment, looking back like she might say something, maybe an apology, maybe not. But then she just nodded and stepped out. When the door closed, the silence of the house hit me like a wave. For the first time since Helen's funeral, I felt like I might actually cry. I sat down on the couch, staring at the cold coffee and untouched cookies, and whispered to the empty room, "What happened to us?" The answer, of course, didn't come. But one thing did: resolve. That night, I pulled out my old files and looked at my will, my financial plans, everything. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep enabling them. Not with money, not with houses, not with gifts they didn't value. Something had to change, and it was going to start with me. That night, after Linda and Mark left, I sat in the quiet living room long after the lights outside the window had gone out. The cookies on the table were still untouched, the coffee cold. For the first time in a long time, the house felt bigger than I could handle, not physically, but emotionally. Every room echoed with memories, and each one asked the same question: where did we go wrong? I tried to tell myself this was just a rough patch, that families fight and say things they don't mean. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just one night or one conversation. It was years in the making. I stared at the photograph on the mantel. Helen, holding baby Mark, while little Linda clung to my leg, smiling so wide you could see the gap where her baby teeth hadn't grown in yet. I remember that day clearly. It was my 32nd birthday. Helen had made her famous lemon cake, and Linda had insisted on blowing out the candles with me. Mark drooled on my shirt as I held him, and we all laughed like life couldn't possibly get better. Back then, birthdays weren't about things. They were about us. Now, it felt like every interaction with my children was transactional, measured in what I could provide financially. Somewhere along the way, they'd learned to see me as a wallet first and a father second. I couldn't help wondering if I had done that to them, if my years of working late, of replacing presents with presents, had taught them the wrong lesson. I stood and walked to my office. It was a small room with an old oak desk Helen had picked out years ago. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder marked estate planning. I hadn't looked at it in years. Inside were my will, my life insurance details, and a list of assets. Flipping through those pages was like looking at my entire life, boiled down to numbers. The value of the house, my savings, stocks, a small life insurance policy meant for family security. I thought of Helen again, how she always said, "Frank, money is just a tool. It's what you build with it that matters." So what had I built? A house full of memories, yes, but also children who thought of my life's work as their safety net, something they were entitled to rather than grateful for. That realization hurt, but it also gave me clarity. I grabbed a pen and a legal pad and began writing revised will instructions. Uno. No unconditional inheritance. Linda and Mark would still be provided for, but not as a blank check. They would each receive something modest, enough to show love and care, but not enough to keep them from standing on their own feet. Doi. Charitable donation. A significant portion of my savings and half the value of the house, if sold after my passing, would go to a local scholarship fund Helen had once supported and to a children's hospital she adored. If my children couldn't appreciate the value of what they'd been given, maybe strangers in need could. 3. Executor instructions. I wrote clear notes about how this wasn't a punishment, but a choice to honor values Helen and I shared: hard work, independence, and giving back. When I was done, I sat back and stared at the papers. My hand trembled slightly, but not from regret, from relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something that aligned with my heart, instead of my fear of losing my children's love. Because the truth was harsh but simple. If they only love me for what I can give them, then it isn't really love at all. The flashback that sealed it. As I packed up the papers, a memory hit me so vividly I had to sit down. It was of Helen's last birthday before she passed. She'd been thin and tired from chemo, but insisted on baking her own cake anyway. I tried to stop her, saying, "You don't have to do this, honey." But she smiled and said, "Birthdays aren't about what we do. They're about who we are together." That night, the kids were still teenagers. They'd given her handmade cards, just folded printer paper with messy drawings, but Helen cried like they were treasures. She pulled me aside later and whispered, "Promise me one thing, Frank. Keep them close. No matter how hard life gets, keep them close." And I had tried. God knows I had tried. But looking at those legal papers now, I realized something. Keeping them close didn't mean giving them everything they asked for. It meant teaching them values, even when it was uncomfortable. I whispered into the quiet room, "I'm sorry, Helen. I hope this is the right way to do it." A new resolve. By midnight, I had packed the revised instructions in a sealed envelope and left it on my desk. Tomorrow, I'd call my lawyer and make it official. Before bed, I walked through the house, touching the walls like they were old friends. The kitchen Helen loved. The hallway where the kids used to race toy cars. The back porch where we'd drink coffee on quiet mornings. I wasn't selling this house. Not now, not to please anyone. This house was a part of my soul, and I wasn't ready to let go of it, especially not to satisfy someone else's financial strain. I slept better that night than I had in months. When I woke up, the sun was shining, warm and golden. I brewed coffee and sat by the window, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes past my yard, their laughter cutting through the morning air. And I realized something. I still had a life. I still had joy to find, even if it didn't come from the people I once thought would always be my foundation. For the first time since Helen's passing, I thought about having friends over, maybe joining a local community group, doing something beyond waiting for calls from Linda and Mark that never came unless they needed something. That birthday had broken something, yes, but it had also opened a door, and I intended to step through it. 1 week later, my house felt different. Not because the furniture had moved or because I'd done any remodeling, but because I had changed. The heaviness I'd been carrying for years, the quiet fear that my children only valued me for what I could give, had begun to lift. After revising my will and talking to my lawyer, I finally felt in control of my own life again. For the first time since Helen passed, I wasn't living in reaction to my children's expectations. I was living by choice. That weekend, I decided to host another dinner. Not a family dinner in the traditional sense. No Linda, no Mark, no tension about gifts or money. This was going to be a celebration of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Gratitude for the people who actually showed up because they wanted to, not because they expected something in return. A different kind of dinner. I invited 3 old friends. Tom, my neighbor, who always helped shovel my driveway in winter. Clara, an old co-worker of Helen's who still checked in on me every few weeks. And George, a retired teacher from down the street who had lost his wife the same year I lost Helen. They had all been there for me quietly over the years, never asking for anything, never making me feel like I had to earn their presence. The menu wasn't extravagant. I made roast chicken again, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because it felt right. I baked Helen's apple pie too, this time without sadness clinging to every movement of my hands. When the house filled with the warm scent of cinnamon, I smiled instead of sighing. When my guests arrived, they came bearing nothing but hugs and laughter. Tom handed me a 6-pack of craft beer. Clara brought a simple potted plant. George, bless his heart, brought a deck of cards and announced, "We're playing poker after dinner, no excuses." For the first time in years, my home felt alive. We ate, we laughed about old neighborhood stories, and we even cried a little when the conversation drifted to Helen. But it wasn't heavy grief. It was warm remembrance. At one point, Clara raised her glass and said, "To Frank, for showing us that it's never too late to start living again. I chuckled and shook my head. I'm not sure I deserve that yet, but thank you. The text that surprised me, halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it, but something told me to look. It was a text from Linda. Dad, I read your letter. I guess I didn't realize how hurtful we sounded. I'm sorry. Can we talk soon? I stared at the screen, reading it twice to make sure it was real. There was no mention of money, no request for help, just a simple human apology. 10 minutes later, another text came in from Mark. Thanks for the watch, Dad. I didn't get it at first, but I wore it today. It felt good. Sorry for how I acted. For the first time since that disastrous birthday dinner, I felt my chest loosen. I didn't text back right away. I wanted to think about what to say, and I didn't want to respond out of raw emotion. But I smiled genuinely and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Tom noticed and asked, "Good news?" "Yeah," I said softly. "Maybe the start of something good." A quiet moment with Helen. Later that night, after my friends had left and the house had gone quiet again, I walked into the bedroom and took out a small photo of Helen from the nightstand. It was one of her favorites. The two of us dancing in the kitchen, flour on our faces because we'd tried baking bread together and failed spectacularly. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the photo. "We might be okay, honey," I whispered. "They're not lost yet. Maybe I'm not, either." A promise to myself. The next morning, I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the sun rise over the yard. For years, I'd started my days waiting for calls, waiting for visits, waiting for things to feel like they used to. Now, I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. I promised myself two things. I wouldn't let loneliness push me into giving just to keep people close. Love isn't for sale. I would leave room for forgiveness. Linda and Mark had made mistakes, yes, but so had I. Maybe I'd taught them the wrong lessons by throwing money at every problem. Maybe we all had some unlearning to do. The ending, and a new beginning. A week later, I met Linda and Mark for coffee at a quiet cafe. There were no arguments, no hidden agendas, just conversation. They apologized again, more openly this time, and I listened. I told them about my new will, about why I made the choices I did. They didn't argue. They just nodded, maybe realizing for the first time that I wasn't their safety net anymore, but still their father. We didn't fix everything in one meeting. There were still years of habits to break, hurts to mend, but for the first time, it felt possible. As I left the cafe, I smiled. My birthday hadn't gone the way I imagined, but maybe it needed to happen that way. Maybe sometimes life has to break your heart a little to show you where it's hardened. That night, I lit one of Helen's old candles at the dinner table and whispered, "Happy late birthday, Frank. Welcome back."